My name is Ethan Ward. I'm 42 years old, and for most of my adult life I believed I understood what love was. I lived in Denver, in a quiet neighborhood that I once thought represented stability, neat lawns, familiar faces, weekend barbecues, everything that made life feel predictable in a comforting way. For years, I repeated the same thought like a mantra. I'm lucky. I found the right woman. My life turned out well. At least, that's what I believed until the night everything shifted, almost imperceptibly at first, and then violently, like the way a calm surface hides the fracture lines beneath it until they tear open. Her name was Maya. We met 9 years ago at a tech conference in Seattle. She was 27 then, sharp, confident, magnetic in a way that made everyone around her pay attention without her trying. I was 33, already established in my field, and admittedly too eager to be impressed by a woman who seemed to see straight through people. But she looked at me differently, or at least, that's what I thought back then. We moved in together within a year, married the next. She pushed me to dream bigger, work harder, climb higher. I pushed her to slow down, breathe, enjoy the calm. It felt like a balance, her fire, my steadiness. Our friends used to joke that we looked like two halves of a strategy meeting. She with urgency, me with structure. I loved her deeply, sincerely, maybe blindly, and for a long time, or what felt like a long time, everything was fine. We had disagreements. Of course, she always hated the way I hesitated before making decisions, and I hated the way she expected the world to rearrange itself for her plans. But relationships survive on compromise, right? That's what I always told myself. Then came in. His name was Alex Turner, a colleague from her company, a senior project manager, the type who always wore fitted shirts and expensive watches, who laughed too loudly at his own jokes and seemed permanently hungry for validation. I met him 3 times before everything fell apart, and each time left me with the same vague discomfort you get when someone smiles too widely while their eyes stay cold. The first time I noticed something off. It was nothing dramatic. Maya came home later than usual, 10:30 p.m. instead of her usual 6:45. She was tired, she said. They had a critical deadline. She dropped her bag on the chair, poured herself a glass of wine, and didn't kiss me like she normally did. I remember thinking she looked distracted, unreachable, but I didn't push. I trusted her. Maybe that was my first mistake. Over the next 2 months, her excuses multiplied: late meetings, weekend team reviews, sudden corporate crises that always involved staying overnight with the core group, and Alex was always mentioned in these stories. Not deliberately, not forcefully, just enough to show he was there, enough to create a pattern. One Sunday morning, I noticed something strange, her phone lighting up over and over on the kitchen counter with his name. She didn't reach for it. She didn't even look. She just kept washing the dishes, humming to herself, pretending not to hear the buzz. I remember standing behind her, watching her shoulders tighten ever so slightly every time the screen lit up. That was the first time something cold settled in my chest. But I told myself I was being paranoid. I repeated every cliché an insecure man uses when he's trying to avoid the truth. She loves me. She chose me. She's just stressed. It's work. It's temporary. I've learned since then that lies sound the sweetest when they're the ones we tell ourselves. The real fracture appeared 2 weeks later. I had taken a half day off work to surprise her. I planned dinner. Bought her favorite wine, even cleaned the house like some kind of lovesick teenager. When she walked through the door and saw everything, she froze. Not the good kind of surprise. It was guilt or fear, or both. Then she said something that I didn't understand at the time but would replay 100 times after. Ethan, you shouldn't have done all this. Not thank you. Not I missed you. Not even a smile. Just disappointment. That night she showered for almost an hour. She never did that before. Then she went to bed without touching me, without even looking at me. In the morning, while she slept, I checked her laptop, not because I wanted to invade her privacy, but because it was open, glowing, filled with notifications. And there it was, a message preview on her desktop chat app. Alex, last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. My heart didn't break instantly. It cracked in slow motion like ice splitting under pressure. I clicked the chat before I could stop myself, and what I saw shredded the last pieces of the world I thought I lived in. Messages, pictures, plans, conversations about me mocking, analyzing, diminishing what we had. And the worst part, she wasn't resisting him. She wasn't confused. She wasn't slipping accidentally. She was choosing him, willingly, repeatedly, enthusiastically. Something inside me turned still. Not anger, not pain, just the quiet realization that the life I believed in was already dead. I didn't wake her. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just closed the laptop, walked out onto the balcony, and stared at the city as the morning sun rose, thinking one thought over and over. If she could destroy us so easily, why should I protect her from the consequences? That was the moment everything in me changed. The moment I stopped being the man she thought she could lie to. The moment I began planning what would come next. The truth is, the story didn't start with revenge. It started with clarity, and clarity can be more dangerous than rage. I didn't confront Maya that morning. I didn't slam doors, demand explanations, or wake her with ultimatums. I walked back into the bedroom, looked at her sleeping peacefully, calm, unbothered, wrapped in the sheets of a home she had already abandoned in her mind, and I felt nothing. Not love, not hate, just an eerie, steady silence. People think betrayal triggers an explosion. In reality, it creates an opening, a sharp, clean break where self-deception used to be. And into that opening, something new grows, not rage, but precision. I showered, dressed, made coffee as usual, and left for work. She texted me around 9 a.m., her message short and rehearsed. Maya, sorry I was distant yesterday. Just a lot on my mind. I love you. I stared at those words for a long moment, not because they hurt, but because of how effortlessly she wrote them. How easily betrayal had become routine for her. How well she had learned to say the exact sentence that would keep me calm and unsuspecting. I typed back, me. I love you too. We'll talk tonight. But the real talking would begin elsewhere. I drove to my office but didn't go inside. Instead, I sat in the parking lot and started making a list: names, dates, details, a timeline of her double life. I read through the screenshots I took from her laptop earlier that morning. Each message, each secret meeting, each smiley face or heart emoji became evidence, a data point, a thread I could pull, and there were a lot of threads. The affair hadn't started recently. That much was clear from their conversations. The familiarity, the ease, the inside jokes, they didn't form overnight. She had been lying to me for months, maybe longer, building two relationships at once while pretending everything was normal. But the most interesting part wasn't what they wrote. It was what they avoided writing. They never mentioned their meetings directly. They used vague code words, checking progress, review cycles, strategy sync, corporate language masking private betrayal. That told me something important. They were being careful, but not careful enough. The first person I contacted was Hannah, a friend of mine who worked as a legal assistant at a family law firm downtown. I didn't tell her everything, only that I needed information on financial documentation, asset protection, and evidence preservation. She didn't ask questions. She trusted me. That meant something in a week where trust felt like an extinct concept. Next, I reached out to a cybersecurity consultant who owed me a favor. He explained how to legally and safely back up shared digital devices, cloud accounts, sync files. Maya wasn't stupid. She deleted messages regularly. But people forget that cloud services keep fragments, backups, metadata. You can delete the body of a message. You can't delete its ghost. By noon, I had more than enough proof to destroy both her and Alex professionally and personally. But I wasn't ready for destruction yet. First, I wanted to understand. I wanted to know why. Not because I hoped there was a good reason, there never is, but because people reveal their true nature when they think nobody's watching. And Maya had been living unobserved for far too long. So instead of going home after work, I drove to her office building and parked across the street. I sat in my car, engine off, and waited. At 6:17 p.m., she walked out. She wasn't alone. Alex walked beside her, too close to be casual, too familiar to be professional. She laughed at something he said, not her usual laugh, but the soft one she used only when she wanted someone to feel special. I watched as they paused outside the entrance. She touched his arm. He brushed her hair back, and then, without hesitation, she leaned in and kissed him, right there, in public, without fear, without guilt, without any awareness that her husband had watched the entire thing from 20 meters away. It wasn't a long kiss, just long enough to confirm everything I needed to know. She didn't love me anymore. Maybe she hadn't for a long time. When they finally separated, she walked to her car with a lightness I hadn't seen in months. I sat in mine, gripping the steering wheel, my knuckles white but my breathing steady. I didn't cry. I didn't break. But a choice crystallized inside me with perfect clarity. I wouldn't confront her yet. I would let her keep digging her own grave. And when the moment was right, I'd bury both of them in it. When Maya came home that night, she smiled at me like nothing had happened. She kissed me on the cheek. She complimented the pasta I cooked. She talked about her long meetings and stressful deadlines, and I smiled back. I matched her tone. I asked gentle questions. I played the part of the trusting husband flawlessly. It stunned me how good she was at lying, but it stunned her more how good I could be. At one point she said, "You've been so distant lately. Everything okay?" I looked her in the eyes and said, "Yeah, just tired." She believed it instantly. Of course she did. She thought she was the only one who could play games. Little did she know that the man she betrayed wasn't the same man sitting across from her anymore. Around 11 p.m., she fell asleep beside me. 5 minutes later, her phone buzzed. "Alex, can't stop thinking about you. Tonight was perfect." I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I simply turned off her screen and placed the phone gently back on the nightstand. Then I lay down beside her and stared at the ceiling for hours, running through every step of what would come next. Not impulsive revenge. Not anger-driven sabotage. No. A plan. A strategy. A slow, precise dismantling of their world. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to accuse her in some dramatic scene. I was going to let her believe everything was fine. Let her think she was winning, because the easiest person to destroy is the one who doesn't see the storm coming. And I had just become the storm. The morning after their little rooftop kiss, I woke up before Maya. I watched her sleeping beside me, the same way I had thousands of times before, but for the first time, I wasn't looking at the woman I loved. I was looking at a stranger wearing my wife's face. There was a time when that sight would have broken me. Not anymore. I slipped out of bed quietly, went to the kitchen, brewed coffee just loud enough so she'd hear it. She always liked to wake up to the smell of it. Funny how people cling to small routines even when they're tearing the big ones apart. She patted in a few minutes later, thick smile on, hair messy in a way I once found adorable. "Morning," she said softly, touching my shoulder. I turned and smiled almost warmly. "Morning," and then she kissed me. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't love. It was routine, a habit she maintained to avoid suspicion. I kissed her back because playing the naive, loyal husband was my greatest weapon now. While she showered and dressed for work, I reviewed the files I'd backed up the night before. Cloud fragments, auto-sync caches, deleted message previews, tiny pieces of her double life scattered like breadcrumbs. Every time I thought I'd reached the limits of her deception, I'd find something new. Photos, calendar entries, restaurant receipts, location logs. She wasn't just reckless. She was comfortable. Cheating is one thing. Building an entire second relationship with the confidence of someone who believes she'll never be caught, That's another dot. By the time she walked into the kitchen fully dressed, I had enough evidence to ruin her career, her reputation, and her carefully curated image of innocence. But that wasn't my goal. Not yet. Her greatest weakness wasn't the affair. Her weakness was believing I knew nothing. When she left for work, I waited 15 minutes, then followed. Not closely, never closely. I kept 2 blocks behind, changed lanes often, stayed invisible. She turned into the freeway ramp and merged into traffic. I didn't have to tail her to the office anymore. I'd already memorized the exact location of Alex's car by now. Instead, I drove to a small cafe a block away from her building and positioned myself near the window with a clear view of the entrance. I pulled out my laptop, pretending to work, while watching the revolving doors across the street. She arrived at 8:57 a.m. Alex at 9:03 a.m. He saw her, smiled, and they shared that small, intimate look to people share when they think the world is blind. It wasn't the look that bothered me. It was the ease. Affairs usually have tension, risk, fear, hesitation. But theirs had rhythm. That meant it had been going on far longer than I initially believed. Around noon, something interesting happened. Maya left her building alone, checking her phone constantly. She crossed the street quickly, her expression tense. I followed from a distance. As she entered a pharmacy, she didn't linger. She bought one item and hurried out. I waited until she returned to her office before walking inside the store. I pulled the receipt bin from the counter. Most people don't realize how many answers live in discarded paper. I sifted through the top few layers and found one with her last 4 card digits. She had bought a pregnancy test. I didn't react, not visibly. I took a photo of the receipt, put it back exactly where I found it, and walked out. Outside, the city seemed quieter than usual. People walked past me laughing, talking, living normal lives while I stood on the sidewalk holding the knowledge that my wife might be carrying another man's child, or mine, or nobody's. The test could be negative. It could be fear, paranoia, a late cycle, but she didn't tell me about it. And that's all I needed to know. Secrets grow in silence, and our marriage had become a garden of them. I didn't confront her that night either. Instead, I made dinner, poured wine, acted normal. She seemed distracted, glancing at her phone, leaving the table twice to check her messages, probably waiting for Alex to ask about the test. She didn't bring it up to me, not even once, which told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't worried about our future. She was worried about their future. After dinner, she said she was exhausted and went to bed early. I waited until I heard her breathing change, then quietly walked into the bathroom. Her purse was on the counter. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. The test was in the trash can hidden under tissues, but not well enough, positive or negative. She had removed it from the box. I put the trash bag back exactly as it was. Then I sat on the edge of the tub and stared at my reflection in the mirror. My face looked calm. Too calm. This is what betrayal does. It teaches you a colder version of yourself, a version who thinks 3 steps ahead, who plans, who observes, who waits. I wasn't afraid of what the test meant. Not anymore. If she was pregnant with his child, I'd use that truth strategically. If she wasn't, her fear alone was already leverage. Because the worst thing you can be to a liar is quiet. Quiet people make them nervous. Quiet people force them to reveal themselves. And I intended to stay quiet for a long time. Before going to sleep, I stood at our bedroom doorway and watched her. She slept peacefully, curled into a ball, unaware of the storm gathering right beside her. I didn't touch her. I didn't lie next to her. I simply whispered into the dark, "You have no idea what you've started." Then I closed the door and slept in the guest room for the first time in our marriage. She didn't come looking for me during the night. Of course she didn't. She was too busy living 2 lives to notice one falling apart. But soon, very soon, she would notice everything. And when she did, I'd be ready. The next morning, Maya woke up before me and stood quietly in the doorway of the guest room, thinking I was still asleep. I could feel her stare, soft, confused, measuring. She lingered just long enough to wonder why I wasn't in our bed, but not long enough to actually ask. Cowards never ask questions they're afraid to hear answers to. I kept my breathing slow and steady until she left. When the door closed, I opened my eyes. Nothing in my chest felt warm anymore. She acted differently that day. Not radically, just enough that anyone who didn't know her would miss it entirely. But I'd been studying this woman for years. I knew every version of her, every shade, every crack in her mask. Her smile was too controlled, her movements too rehearsed, her words too cautious. Maya was hiding something. Not the affair. I already knew that part better than she thought. She was hiding fear. Fear changes people. They get quieter, or more talkative, or more dramatic. Maya got strategic, choosing every sentence, like she was stepping through a minefield. "Did you sleep okay?" she asked while tying her hair in the mirror. I nodded. "Fine. You?" Yeah." She forced a laugh. "Weird dreams?" I didn't ask about them. I watched her wait for me to ask. Control is strongest when the other person doesn't realize they've lost theirs. She left for work with a quick kiss on my cheek. Habit, panic, confusion all mixed into one shaky gesture. After she walked out the door, I counted to 10, grabbed my jacket, and followed again. But not to her office this time. I drove to the other side of the city, to a neighborhood far from her bubble of comfort. A place she didn't know, with people she didn't recognize. I wasn't following her anymore. I was following him. Alex lived in a sleek modern apartment building, the kind that pretends it's affordable because it has concrete walls and industrial accents. I waited in the parking lot, sipping coffee, watching the mirrored glass doors reflect everything except the truth hidden inside. He came out at 10:14 a.m. alone, tired, scanning his phone with a look I recognized. Worried. He and Maya weren't aligned today. That alone was interesting. I let him drive off before walking into the building. The front desk security guard barely looked up from his phone. I passed with the confidence of someone who belonged there. People trust certainty more than badges. I found the elevator, pressed the button, and rode to the 4th floor. I didn't knock on Alex's door. I didn't need to. I only needed one thing: the hallway cameras. Every building like this keeps a backup system in a poorly locked maintenance room. 3 minutes later, I was inside, scrolling through videos. And there it was. 3 days earlier, 1:27 p.m. Maya entering his apartment. I watched the footage with a dead, steady calm. She wasn't hesitant. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't even trying to hide. She knew the cameras were there. She just didn't care. But Alex, he was different. He opened the door quickly, checking both directions before pulling her inside. Fear again. The same fear she had this morning. Their little world wasn't as solid as they believed. Good. Cracks make room for leverage. That afternoon, I went to the pharmacy, the same one where she bought the pregnancy test. I wasn't looking for a test this time. I wanted the security footage. Most pharmacies don't secure their DVR systems. A simple distraction was all it took. "Excuse me," I said to the clerk. Someone might have dropped their wallet near aisle 5. He hurried away. I walked behind the counter, pulled the small DVR box forward, and took a photo of the display. Playback. Zoom. Timestamp. Maya, walking in with her phone to her ear, hand shaking slightly, voice urgent. I couldn't hear the audio, but I could read her lips. One sentence, over and over. "I'm late." I said, "I'm late, Alex." So he knew. They were in this together. And she still hadn't told me. I walked out of the store feeling strangely calm. It's incredible how betrayal stops hurting after the 50th wound. Eventually, it just becomes information. And information is power. When Maya came home that night, she acted like nothing was wrong. She brought takeout, my favorite, even though she never remembered details like that unless she needed something. We ate in silence. While I ate, she picked at her food, glancing at her phone every 10 seconds. She was waiting for a message that never came. Good. That meant they were fighting. After dinner, she finally spoke. Why did you sleep in the guest room? Because I know you're cheating. Because I know about the pregnancy test. Because I know everything. I smiled instead. Bad dreams, I said softly. She stared at me for a long moment, trying to read me. But guilt makes people blind. They see what they want to see, not what's there. She came around the table, sat beside me, and took my hand. We're okay, right? I looked her straight in the eyes and lied with a steady, practiced calm. Of course we are. Her relief washed over her too quickly, too obviously. She didn't love me. She needed me. Need is stronger than love. Need is leverage. And leverage is how people like me win. She fell asleep quickly that night, exhausted from the mental gymnastics of pretending she wasn't lying. When her breathing slowed, I picked up her phone from the nightstand. I didn't unlock it. I didn't need to. Her notifications were enough. To messages from Alex unopened, both with the same preview. We need to talk. Her worst nightmare, not the test, not the possibility of pregnancy. Her nightmare was losing control. I put the phone back exactly where it was, walked to the guest room, and lay down, staring at the ceiling. I whispered the truth she hadn't yet realized. This time, I'm not the one who's afraid, because the moment liars lose control, they destroy themselves, and soon Maya would too. I woke up before sunrise, long before Maya's alarm, long before her breathing shifted from deep sleep into the shallow, nervous rhythm she always had in the mornings now. A guilty person never wakes peacefully. They come back to consciousness like someone stepping onto thin ice. I sat in the guest room for a moment, letting the silence settle. Today felt like a turning point, though I wasn't sure which direction the blade would cut. But I did know one thing today: she would finally break, not because I would force her, but because guilt always collapses under its own weight. Maya came into the kitchen wearing the same soft, careful expression she'd been practicing for days, the kind she used whenever she needed to mask the edges of a lie. "Morning," she whispered, searching my face for any sign of suspicion. I smiled back, just enough warmth, just enough calm. "Morning." She poured coffee with a slight tremble in her wrist. Not enough for a stranger to notice, but enough for me. She was drowning in her own thoughts. Something between fear and anticipation twisted beneath her skin, like she was waiting for a truth she hoped she could outrun. "Do you work late tonight?" she asked. "No," I said. "You." She hesitated, the way liars do when they need a second to choose a story. "No, I should be home around 7. Should be, not will be." Her eyes flicked to her phone. She was waiting for him again. Good. Let her wait. When she left for work, I followed, but not closely. She went straight to her office, walked inside with the stiff spine of someone terrified of being cornered. Not by me, by in. She expected Alex to reach out. She feared what he might say. She feared losing control of the narrative she crafted so carefully. And then it happened. At 9:52 a.m., she walked outside to take a call. She didn't see me, didn't even think to look for me. Her attention was entirely on the phone at her ear. Her voice was sharp, low, urgent. "No, Alex, this isn't a good time. I told you, just stop." "Not here." She turned her back to the office windows, acting like she wasn't unraveling. A pause. "No, I'm not talking to him yet. I need to think." My chest tightened, not from pain anymore, but from clarity. She wasn't confused. She wasn't remorseful. She was trying to figure out which life benefited her more. And she hadn't chosen me. Not once. By noon, she was pacing around the parking lot. She kept glancing at the building, chewing the inside of her cheek, her worst habit, the one that always surfaced when she felt cornered. Her mask slipped. Just for a moment. That was all I needed. I stepped out of my car and walked toward her, calm and quiet. She froze when she saw me. "Hey," she said too quickly. "What are you doing here?" "I was nearby," I answered. "Thought I'd take you to lunch." She blinked hard once, twice, processing the sudden shift in control. She forced a smile, but her eyes gave her away. "Oh, yeah, that'd be nice." We walked to the small cafe around the corner. She kept checking over her shoulder, terrified someone from her other life might appear. By the time we sat down, she was already sweating. I let the silence hang. Silence terrifies liars. They need noise to hide behind. She pushed her salad around the plate. Everything okay? I asked calmly. Yeah, she said, looking everywhere but at me. Just work stuff, lies, small, clumsy lies. She couldn't even maintain her usual grace. Good. Fear makes truth spill faster than anger. After lunch, she went back to the office. I didn't follow her inside. I didn't have to. I waited in the car and watched. At 2:11 p.m. Alex walked out the side entrance, alone, shaking, on the phone with someone, probably her. He paced violently, running his hands through his hair. Everything between them was falling apart. I didn't need to cause chaos. I only needed to watch them implode. That evening, Maya came home later than she'd promised. 8:36 p.m. Exactly the kind of slip someone makes when they're trying to play two sides of a collapsing world. She walked into the house slowly, as if entering a courtroom instead of her home. Hey, she said softly. Sorry I'm late. I didn't answer with words. I just looked at her. Really looked. She froze. Something wrong? Silence. Her breathing picked up, shallow and fast. Her eyes darted across the room. For the first time since this entire nightmare began, she wasn't playing a role. She was scared. Not of me physically. She knew I wasn't violent. She was afraid of what I knew. Afraid of what I might say. Afraid of losing the version of reality she'd been weaving. Can we talk? She asked gently, voice trembling. Sure, I said. She exhaled like someone stepping off a cliff. We sat on opposite ends of the couch. She twisted her fingers together, trying to gather courage she didn't have. I feel like you're distant, she whispered. Like you're hiding something from me. The irony almost made me laugh. I kept my face calm. What makes you think that? She swallowed hard. Her voice cracked. Because I'm hiding something from you? There it was. Her mask finally cracked. A single tear slid down her cheek, not from regret, but from panic. She didn't confess out of guilt. She confessed because she sensed she was losing control. She took a shaky breath. I haven't been honest. I've made mistakes. I want to explain. Stop, I said quietly. She froze mid-sentence. You don't need to explain, I continued, voice steady. Her eyes widened. You know. I know enough. Silence. Heavy. Sharp. Her face crumpled, not into sorrow, but into fear. Fear of consequences. Fear of losing stability. Fear of losing me. Can we fix this? She whispered. I looked at her for a long, quiet moment. And then I said the truth she never expected. You broke something you can't fix. The words sliced through the room like glass. She covered her mouth and cried, not because of love, but because of loss. Loss of control. Loss of power. Loss of me. I stood up, walked to the guest room, and closed the door without another word. Behind it, she collapsed to the floor. And for the first time since this entire nightmare began, I felt nothing. No pain, no anger, no heartbreak. Just clarity. Her lies had finally run out of places to hide. And tomorrow everything would end properly. Not with revenge, not with rage, but with truth. And truth is the one thing she never learned how to survive.